All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. We're so glad that y'all are here today for our webinar on student basic needs. So just a little bit of housekeeping as we start. We are in webinar mode for this. So during the presentation, we'll ask that you use the Q&A or the chat box. Our presenters are ready for your questions, so do feel free to use that at any time. So as we begin to start our webinar, we want to do a little poll. Our presenters wanted to know who was in the room as they began their presentation. So our question today, as we launch this poll, is: in your work with students, which best describes your role? So we have that poll launched, and we'll give you just a few minutes or seconds to answer that. Hey, we have got some responses coming in. About half of our participants at this point are high school counselors. And then we have a handful of community-based employees, also a handful of higher education employees. So that is kind of where we have landed in kind of those three buckets this morning: high school counselor, community-based organization employee, and higher education employee. So thank y'all for participating in that. All right. So again, welcome to the webinar. I am Shannon Grimsley, Assistant Director of External Training and Partnerships for the Woodward Hines Education Foundation and the Get to College program. We are recording today's session and will send a link to anyone who has registered. For those watching today's recording, today's date is March the 3rd, 2026, and the material in this webinar is current through the 25-26 school year. In today's session, Student Basic Needs, you will hear national and state data and programs that support students with their basic needs while in college. I will now share a little background on Get to College and a few logistics about the webinar before we get started. Get to College is a nonprofit program of the Woodward Hines Education Foundation. We have 4 centers in Mississippi, one in Jackson, Ocean Springs, and South Haven, and also our new mobile center that will be rolling around the state of Mississippi. So if you see us in our mobile center, as we say, please give us a honk. We're very excited about that. And in all of our centers, including our mobile center, we help parents, students, and high school counselors with all aspects of college planning and financial aid. And all of our services are 100% completely free. In the centers, some of the things we do are offer personalized college counseling appointments where we can help students know when to apply for admission and scholarships. We can help fill out their FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, and also advise on things such as essay writing and interviewing. As we mentioned earlier in the webinar, we cannot see or hear you, but do ask that you ask us questions through the Q&A or the chat at any time. Along with myself, my colleague Kirsten Dufour is here, and we'll be monitoring and replying to the Q&A today, but we'll also have a time where our presenters can answer that live Q&A at the end. But as I said, feel free to message your questions at any time. So now, without further ado, we are going to turn this presentation over to Dr. Erin Eaton, who's the Assistant Director for Academic and Student Affairs at the Mississippi Community College Board, and also Carrie Welton, our who is a Senior policy strategist at Trellis Strategies. So we met Carrie in the last year as we did our Ascent to 55 convening, and both of them wanted to do their own bios instead of me reading a bio today. So I'm going to turn it over to you ladies for your presentation.
Thanks, Shannon. Erin, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Good morning, everybody. I'm Erin Eaton. Um, my bio is short. That's one of the reasons I think we wanted to do it ourselves. I have been at the Mississippi Community College Board for a little over 5 years now. I've been in higher education for almost 30 years and worked with students directly for the majority of that time, primarily at a private four-year, but also at a public four-year as well, and loved the work, loved students, and still have a heart for them and their success. I work directly with the 15 community colleges from the Community College Board and support and in various projects with them and with different community partners like Woodward Hines and Get to College. Prison education and some other things are some of the things that we work on with our partners. I've had the opportunity to meet with Carrie and not present with Carrie, but Carrie spoke at our Ascent to 55% convening back in the fall, and on this topic actually, and it's an important topic, and I'm so glad you guys are here for that today. So Carrie, want to go ahead?
Thanks very much, Erin. Hey, everyone. Carrie Welton, Senior Policy Strategist. That is a mouthful at Trellis Strategies. I have been with Trellis since about June. I'll talk a little bit more about who Trellis is in just a moment, but my background and experience is actually in the public benefit, human services sort of side of the programs. Prior to joining Trellis, I was at an organization called the Institute for College Access and Success in DC, as well as the Hope Center at Temple University. I also worked at the Center for Law and Social Policy, but most importantly, I'm a former first gen, low income, experienced basic needs and security, single teen parent who experienced a lot of the barriers and challenges. My four-year degree took me 12 years. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night is the acknowledgement that I'm one of the lucky ones and how unjust that is, and really addressing the systemic barriers that hold people back from being able to experience that financial independence for themselves and for their children is the thing that fuels me. And I do have some slides I'm going to share. As was already mentioned, this is a small group, which I love. We would like to keep things conversational. Please pop into the chat or the Q&A at any point in time, because I have some slides I'm going to share about who Trellis is, how we think about today's learners, which we call modern learners. I'm going to share some survey data that talks about basic needs and security and student financial wellness. I'm going to share a little bit of data from Mississippi from the institutions, the higher education institutions that have participated in that survey. And then we'll talk a little bit about why a focus on basic needs and security, why some of these things are so important. I'm a nerd. There's lots of data here. There's going to be lots of information. So please jump in at any point in time. We would love to make sure that you have the opportunity to say, hey, go back. That was like a really rich slide. Or, hey, I have a question. Can you repeat that? So please do feel free to jump in. And give me just 1 second. I'm going to share my slides. Um, Current share. Okay, and Erin, can you give me a yes if you can see my, I know it's slides or review right now, but can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, groovy. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not familiar with Trellis, we're a trusted research and technical assistance firm. We've existed for about 40 years and have actually worked with quite a few PBIs and HBCUs in the South on a program called Project Success. We're probably best known for our Student Financial Wellness Survey, which is an annual survey of not only basic needs and security, but how students feel about their institutions, their work, their caregiving status, their parenting. We ask some questions about housing security. We ask questions about how people are paying for college, about work, about a large cross section of things. And I do want to reemphasize that the Student Financial Wellness Survey is free for institutions. Institutions receive a report with their data, and then we're also available to help institutions think about how do you interpret that data to make better connections to supports and to institutional policies and practices that can help students succeed. Actually, our new 2025 survey information is going to be out in about a month. So if you're not already signed up for our newsletters or on our website and you would like that information, please feel free to go ahead and sign up. And I will drop that in the link when I'm done sharing some of these slides. I saw something pop up in the chat. Is there anything there that I should? Okay, cool. All right, that was just you, Kirsten. Thank you. Not just you. So, Trellis is work is really informed by understanding that the pathway of the modern learner is not linear. We know that interruptions, restarts, and shifts in direction are common. This is absolutely true for me. And it really reflects the complex interplay of education and work, finances, and personal responsibility. And we know that the modern learner's journey is reflected by their persistence and the determination. And for us, really understanding their experiences allow us to better support their progress, whether that's reentry or completion, and really create opportunities that align with both educational goals and workforce demands for students, institutions, and communities. So we know that the modern learner often has higher time poverty. They have less time for school. They're working longer hours, which obviously those are closely related. They have low financial security and higher debt amounts, and I'll talk about a couple of those numbers in just a moment. And there are increasing challenges to student identity, with more students identifying as workers first than students. So in our fall 2024 student financial wellness survey, we had about 53,000 students participate in that with about an 8% response rate, which is pretty good, and had a really good mix of 2 and 4 year institutions. And one of the things that our survey found that we think is really interesting is only about 5% were able to pay solely based on personal savings or current wages from school. And we really think this speaks to the myth of people being able to self-pay for college, and also reflects that there are higher rates of unmet financial need. We know that financial aid assistance is often insufficient, and that more people are borrowing and taking on more student debt. And despite those challenges, 73% of students agreed that the cost of college is a good investment in their financial future, and 84% agreed or strongly agreed that a college degree will provide them with a higher quality of life. And the thing that really strikes me when we think about some of these numbers is, we have more students enrolling with lower incomes, more students enrolling who are caregivers. And when you have subsets of students who arguably have the most to risk and can least afford to enroll and to pair that, enrollment with caregiving and work, that's really a reflection that the alternative is worse. So we know that many students are enrolling or trying to complete a college degree because for me, as a low income student, it wasn't just about having a meaningful career, it really was a lifeline out of poverty. And so what we saw in our 2024 survey was that most students are working while enrolled. We see almost 70% of students across both 2 and 4 year institutions are working while enrolled, and many students have more than one job. And we also saw that hours week per work, that the vast majority were working over 20 hours per week, and almost half of 2 year students were working 40 hours or more per week. And you can see there's a little bit of different rates there among 2 and 4 year students, and then full and part-time. And then, as I mentioned, 36% of students who consider themselves workers who go to school rather than students who work. And we saw much higher rates of people who consider them workers first among parenting students or caregiving students. And then working while going to school, typical amount of hours spent in a 7-day work week working for pay, which looks like is a duplicate slide. My apologies there, at least for the information on the right. I will focus on the data the data on the left is duplicative. The data on the right is new information. So we saw that many students, particularly those who identified as workers first, were saying that their need to work was interfering with their ability to interact with activities at school or social events, which we know is where most students in post-secondary programs are building that social capital that's going to help them in the future with their networking, with their ability to get jobs. And then working and providing caregiving for dependents, unreliable transportation, these were all cited as barriers that can impede student progress, academic progress. And what we increasingly see in the data is that students are not stopping out or not enrolling due to academic challenges. It's overwhelmingly these non-tuition life barriers that are getting in the way. So as I mentioned, we did a little bit of a look back from 2021 to 2023 of the Mississippi institutions that participated in the Student Financial Wellness Survey. And we did a little bit of a comparison here. I'm not going to go through all of the data on this. Shannon, I'm happy to have Shannon send these slides out if y'all are interested afterwards. but we compared a couple of these to the information that we had in Mississippi and then that we had versus all of the national respondents in our survey. And what we saw was that in Mississippi, all Mississippi respondents and national respondents had similar rates of very low and low food insecurity. We saw that less students in Mississippi reported being housing insecure than nationally, 36% in Mississippi versus 43% nationally. Again, a little bit lower rates of homelessness in Mississippi, 12% versus 14%. And I do want to say, as a data and policy nerd, that's a much smaller sample size in Mississippi, so that could account for some of the differentiation and the differences that we're seeing there. So I wouldn't overinterpret the national and Mississippi differences too much. And then very similar rates of among the students who reported any basic needs insecurity. So that was food insecurity, housing insecurity, and homelessness. Similar rates in Mississippi and nationally, almost 60% said that they experienced any one of those. And then students who experienced all three at once was 7% in Mississippi and 9% nationally. Oh, sorry, just an animation there. And then in Mississippi versus national, we looked across these different demographics. Among Mississippi respondents, 28% reported being a first generation student versus almost 40%. And the national sample, 14% were parenting students in Mississippi versus 20% nationally. And then similar rates, 65 and 68% were working. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight, particularly for this group and what we think about as students are making the transition from K-12 into higher education, is that in Mississippi, the community eligibility provision, if you're not aware of it, is an option within the school meals program that improves student access to nutritious foods by allowing schools and school districts that are serving large numbers of children from families with low incomes to offer meals at no charge to all students, which is it's a really powerful option, because particularly when you think about stigma and when you think about, particularly how difficult it is to be a student at all today, in K-12, wanting to fit in and not wanting to stand out, community eligibility in a school allows all students to access free and reduced price lunches without having to distinguish who is receiving those services and who isn't. And in the 2024-25 school year, 268 schools in Mississippi adopted community eligibility to be able to provide those benefits for those schools. And an additional 426 schools were eligible but did not participate. So we're really talking about, what is that? So so like almost 700 schools in Mississippi who were eligible for community eligibility, acknowledging that those communities were experiencing high rates of food insecurity and had families with low income. So we acknowledge that in the post-secondary space, when we talk about basic needs, it's really just an acknowledgement that those students who are food insecure or who come from families with low incomes don't all of a sudden become food secure when they get to college. So when we talk about basic needs initiatives and why we focus on basic needs initiatives, we know that direct services provide really essential support services, but they're not addressing the underlying structural causes of basic needs insecurity. We know that high housing costs, wage inequities, and policy barriers really significantly contribute to unmet basic needs. I'll share a little bit more data on that in just a moment. But really thinking about a holistic approach, this is why, one of the things I do and I've done for 10 years is work with states to look at what are the institutional level opportunities that you can undertake to address basic needs and security. What are the policy and program level barriers? So thinking across a program like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, where can states maximize those policy options? And y'all have some really great people in your Human Services office who are working on improving those SNAP policies to improve access for college students. Mississippi has already undertaken some of those opportunities, but really thinking about where to remove those barriers in state policies and improving the alignment of programs across higher education, public benefit programs, workforce development institutions to really maximize the alignment of those programs. And then really recognizing that, using data and lived experiences to help people make informed decisions so we can target those solutions effectively is part of what I do and why I'm in this work. So one of the things I want to highlight is that we are increasingly seeing across multiple sources and across multiple studies that personal financial challenges are actually the leading barrier why people are not enrolling, why they're struggling while they're enrolled, and while they're at risk of or end up stopping out. And as I mentioned, I'm a nerd, so this is lots of data. I'm not going to read all of this. I just want to highlight a couple of things. So, to reinforce that prior point, we see that 77% of unenrolled adults, those who are not currently participating in any post secondary program, said the need to work or work conflicts are the reason why they are not enrolled, which is just a personal financial barrier. They cannot enroll because of personal finances. And then we also see that among almost 50% of enrolled undergraduate students, they report having difficulty concentrating due to their financial situation. And what we see is that when people are reporting like mental health challenges or stress or anxiety or some of those barriers, it's really due to these financial circumstances that are one of the underlying reasons for that. And there's a little bit of a different rate here, but among two different studies, about 35 to 50% of students that were surveyed said personal financial reasons were the reason that they actually stopped out. So this is, underscoring the need to focus on non-tuition strategies if what we want to do is help people get to college, to stay in college, and to complete a college credential. And I know this must be particularly disheartening for states and institutions who really have been working diligently to bring down the cost of tuition and fees, because when we see adjusted for inflation has actually declined over the past 10 years, at least among public institutions. And what has not declined, as many of us know personally, are living expenses. So this chart represents only a 4-year time period from 2020 to 2024. And what we see is costs are up across all categories by about 21%, with transportation having risen the most, followed closely by food and housing. So it's really unsurprising that people are reporting not only educational challenges, but are struggling to make ends meet overall. And that's going to be particularly acute for people who've not completed a degree or credential. So we see that tuition and fees really are the hidden part, or are not the hidden part of this iceberg. It's the non-tuition expenses that are the bulk of the issue. We see that at 4-year public colleges and universities, tuition and fees make up about 40% of a student's cost. And for community college students, that's about 20%. So 80% of costs for community college students are non-tuition, and 60% of costs for 4-year students are non-tuition. So this is why and what we focus on and think about in, why basic needs and how we think about focusing on basic needs is all of the programs on the left-hand side and the pillars of what we think about as traditional higher education supports, and really expanding that to think about how are we tapping into well-studied, large-scale public benefit and workforce development programs that provide food assistance, income support, childcare, healthcare, housing, and transportation, and really being strategic and thoughtful at the state level, at the institutional level, at the community level, in the transition from K-12 to higher education, about how are we finding where all of these programs exist and maximizing support to really get people to and through those post-secondary programs. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are all of the programs that I work across when we think about nutrition assistance, cash assistance, housing, healthcare, other supportive services, and the various barriers that exist in policy. So when you look at that middle column at barriers, this is what I go talk to states about. I'm like, this is a barrier in your childcare policy, and if you want more of your state residents achieving your state's educational attainment goal, being able to secure economic mobility, being able to improve outcomes for families and children. These are some of the barriers that are within your power to tackle, and you can do that with your existing authority. So this is all things that states could be doing right now. And when we think about institutional practices, Rand Corporation, not corporation, Rand is a nonprofit. They did a report. It's linked down here in the source. It's called Promising Approaches to Student Basic Needs Supports. And what they did was look across a variety of institutions to identify where were the high impact activities at the institutional level that were really moving the needle for students on their basic needs and security. And what they found was comprehensive basic needs support, such as nutritional support, housing support, transportation, and emergency aid, and then case management approaches that can reduce the administrative process and clarify eligibility requirements that also included ongoing follow-up were a key thing. Now, all of us that are doing this work acknowledge and recognize that that takes resources, That takes dedicated support, whether that's from institutional leadership or that is, funding sources. So I don't say these things in the abstract of acknowledging that this requires dedicated investment and capacity for people to be able to have the time and ability to do those things. And then what we also saw was that institutions were participating in broad outreach efforts. So there's been a lot of conversation about how can we use FAFSA data to do benefits outreach, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It may be overly narrow. So what RAND found was that broader outreach efforts through a variety of channels that not only improve student awareness about the availability of supports, but also helps them connect to community partners. And if you really think about it from a student standpoint, when I was on campus, if I had had my institution communicating that if you're struggling, there are supports available. If you need help and you can't afford groceries this month, come to our food pantry. Even that cultural shift in my institution communicating that they cared, that there were supports available, normalizing that everybody experiences hardship, whether that's like long-term hardship or, a short-term hardship that could be addressed is really important. And Aaron, also like, please jump in at any time. I'm just going here. So you're gonna have
You're
to
doing
hop on
great.
if you've got. I see you shaking your head. And I'm like, do you want to hop in here?
No, you're doing great.
Okay, so having dedicated basic needs support staff and partners with the knowledge of how to support students, and then that institutional culture that really prioritizes basic needs and student well-being. And we know that, institutions using data to assess students' need, we obviously recommend the Student Financial Wellness Survey. I can do that in really good conscience because we don't make any money off of it. It doesn't cost us anything. So really understanding what your students' needs are, using that information to target services and to advocate for changes on campus and for more supports. Identifying areas for program improvement, whether that is in the financial aid process or maybe it's in the food bank if your institution's lucky enough to have one, and then assessing the effectiveness of various supports where they exist. The only thing that I would add is, when we think about what higher education can do in this space, really thinking about data sharing opportunities, removing policy barriers, as I mentioned, those barriers in that center column. Institutional barriers can include award displacement. So, for those of you that are not aware, award displacement is when a student receives their financial aid package and they can, maybe they have Pell and maybe they're eligible for, subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And then the institution comes and says, we have a $2,000 scholarship for you. You don't have to pay it back, but they're going to reduce that overall aid package by that $2,000. That's actually an institutional policy and it's called award displacement. And overall, we feel like that's unhelpful for students. Students should have the choice whether or not they decide to not take out that additional $2,000 in loans or, if they want to, and acknowledging that an institutional policy that reduces overall aid may be on the net not helpful for students. And then really institutions sharing information about available supports. Y'all have us in Mississippi. Your state has a public benefits website. Institutions are sharing, hey, if you are having trouble affording groceries this month, maybe you're eligible for SNAP and you could go apply on the state website. So when we think about all those places that we're already communicating with students and what information we can share about available supportive resources, there's tons of opportunities to be able to communicate with them what's out there without taking on needing to be an expert in those things. You don't. I don't think institutions can or should be necessarily public benefits experts. There are people in your state who are, that is exactly their role, and even partnering with local human services agencies. So, what we've increasingly seen is your county or your local human services office can be and is sometimes really interested in being a partner at the table to say, hey, let me come talk about the benefits for which they might be eligible. Let me come help do some application assistance. We've seen that in several instances, and that is what they do. That is what they're paid to do. Thinking about ways to centralize student support services. I was a community college student, two different community colleges actually, and then I had transferred to a large public 4-year, and I could not understand why I had to walk 45 minutes across campus to go from my financial aid office to my academic advising office. And so when we think about centralizing support services, this isn't just about basic need supports. This is about institutions being thoughtful about how are you cutting down on the capacity and the bandwidth for students to just accomplish bare minimum tasks without creating additional burdens because somebody wanted it in a building with a fancy name and modernized amenities or something. I don't know. And then again, surveying students about their needs. And we also talk about community partnerships, as I just mentioned. Third-party partners, that's kind of a wonky technical term. I think about this as like these are your workforce development partners, these are your Goodwills, these are your community action agencies. We call them third-party providers because that's kind of their relationship with the state. But they're really just your community-based organizations and community-based partners. One of the institutions that I worked with in New Orleans, Delgado Community College, they had this really interesting partnership with a faith-based organization that was coming on campus to provide mental health services for students. That was both like crisis mental health supports and ongoing counseling services. And that community-based, faith-based organization was providing those services free of charge. They were already in the community trying to meet the needs of people. And it was just through those conversations and through those in-person relationships that really helped Delgado bring those services on campus for their students. I'm gonna like mostly skip over this, but really the key takeaway here is that people who are in education access and completion support roles play in those capacities play really important roles in conversations about how state and federal resources are allocated and about those partnerships and identifying those strategic partnerships and opportunities to better improve student access to supports and reduce basic needs and security. I'm going to stop slide sharing in just a second, but I just wanted to, if you are interested in our student financial wellness survey, if you are interested in signing up for the results that are getting ready to come out, or you want to talk more about bringing the student financial wellness survey to Mississippi, which based on a meeting when I was there in Jackson, it was like a month ago, there's already some conversations about wanting to do like a statewide student financial wellness survey, which I think would be really powerful and give us the opportunity to talk about what are some of those state level strategies and how would that data and information help both institutions and some of those state level strategies, particularly now that Mississippi has an educational attainment goal. It's a really complementary resource. Again, just sharing my contact information, email me for anything. If you're like, you said this on the slide and I don't know what you were talking about and I want to chat more about it, I'm an open book. Don't hesitate to reach out.
And I
I
just
also
wanted to
talk
mention,
really fast. I'm
oh, go
from the
ahead.
Midwest, so hope y'all stayed with me there.
I will say that Carrie, when she says she's an open book, she means it. I have had several conversations with Carrie, and I've listened to you talk more than one time, and I'm still making notes about things that I'm hearing because it's just so much good information. But you did touch on a couple of things that I just wanted to affirm. One of them is this survey that Carrie mentioned, the Student Financial Wellness Survey. We are actually in talks, at least on the community college level, about having the community colleges participate in that. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're talking about it. And she's exactly right. Part of the goal of that is to help us with our state attainment goal. If you don't know ascent to 55%, I would encourage you to look that up. Woodward Hines is a supporter of that. And I'm going to forget what the Mississippi Economic Council just changed their name to. I think it's the Mississippi Business Alliance. Okay, thank you, Shannon. But that is actually where that particular program is housed. Jean Massey is the director of that. And I was in a meeting with Jean and some other people yesterday on the attainment goal, and this very thing came up. So it is in conversation. It is something that we are looking at and talking about, and not just talking about, but want to reach out to our community colleges and hopefully our 4 years as well.
Yeah.
And we actually have another group. There are lots of groups that's meeting next week on kind of launching this officially and sort of getting it off the ground as much as we can. Part of that has been I have surveyed our student. Typically at a college campus, the basic needs responsibilities are going to fall within a student affairs / student development area. Everybody does it a little differently, but primarily that's where that's going to be found at your local school, your local campus. A couple of things I wanted to share with you guys that we did hear back from our student affairs professionals. I didn't hear from every campus. They're busy this time of year. I understand. I did it. Is that the majority of them don't have a formal coordinator on campus. So what that looks like on the ground is you've got somebody who's working really hard to do this and about 7 million other things. Doesn't reduce their passion or their desire to do it well, but it's a lot of work for one person to do it. Some people do have somebody that's all that they do, but the majority of them are doing several different things.
Yes. And Erin, I
Um,
wanted to mention
mhm,
that too because Trellis is happy to come talk to institutions about like what does that entail? What is required? Like what is the lift on their part? What is the lift on the
mhm.
students' parts? What are different use cases? Like helping them understand that we're not just trying to get to your students because we want their information, but helping them think about how does it align with our institutional goals? How does it align with statewide goals? That's always something we're happy to come chat to y'all about. Um,
Absolutely.
the other
Absolutely.
thing that I wanted to mention is as we think about I'm just going to consider myself an honorary Mississippian at this point.
You're
How's
just one
that
of
sound?
us. That's right. That's right.
One of the things we can think about too is that one of the things that we accomplish in Kentucky through that basic needs work is we got dedicated basic needs navigators on all of the public 2-year campuses with existing state dollars.
Mhm.
Okay, you have single stop at Hines. Okay, yep, that's great.
Yep.
Um, that's great. Thank you, Lakeisha. And single stop is great.
Hey,
So we think
Lakeisha.
of so we think about how do we take a model like single stop, think about how do we leverage existing state resources to be able to expand that model and to get institutions to adopt single stops practices within just the way that they do business. So there's a couple of other examples that we can think about of how to look at where there are existing state resources to get institutions more support for things like basic needs eligibility screener support services, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, and single stop is a great example, and it's also a great example of how everybody's doing it a little differently. That's something that Heinz
Mhm.
does, and it depends on support and all of those things that we know it depends on. One of the other responses that I saw that really stood out to me was one of the questions was, has demand for basic needs services changed in the last 3 years? Just 3 years. And 60% of the respondents says it has increased significantly. So this isn't something that's going away. It's not a trend necessarily. I think it's going to be something that schools continue to see, as Kiri talked about, as we see the traditional, which there's no such thing anymore, college student change as a worker who goes to school, which that really has stuck out to me the last couple of times I've heard you say that, Kiri. And I think you can probably guess what one of the biggest barriers is, and it's just financial support and staffing, just those basic things that the college needs to be able to do this. A lot of their support comes from private donations and community partnerships. So I just wanted to throw a couple of like boots on the ground pieces in there as we've kind of talked about this. And another thing that you said, and I mentioned the attainment goal, was some college and no credential. And a lot of those students, and this isn't, I don't have a study to show you, for this, but just reading and listening and talking over the last couple of years, a lot of those students are probably this exact student who was going to school, things were going okay, something happened, life happened, and be it childcare or lost a job or any of those things can completely derail a student at any moment. And so we have a lot of those students out there who got started and something just got them off course. So and that's kind of all I wanted to share as well. But I will be happy to, as Carrie said, if you have questions after or have questions now.
Also, just wanted to share the highlight of my presentation might be this guy.
He's cute. I know we've got some high school counselors. I think we said that. I'm kind of curious about your thoughts and kind of from where you stand working with students, and you hand them off, so to speak, to the colleges and universities. Is this a conversation? Is this something that is kind of on the radar for high school counselors or teachers?
I will see if that comes in for us, but I think definitely we here at Get to College definitely hear from counselors and students. What supports are here for our students. That is something they look at when they're looking at colleges. And I'll put in a shameless plug here. I was going to do it later, but for our Sweet Magnolias tours that are coming up in April, where counselors and educators and career coaches can get a more in-depth look at the college campuses. I know that that was something that came up when we did it 2 summers ago, that that this was a time for counselors and educators to sit in the room and really ask those hard questions of the administrators at the colleges. And that was definitely a question that was asked at every campus. In fact, when we went to Delta State, we spent a large amount of time in their student support services center. Not just tutoring and those sorts of things, mental health, those things were important, but also like, what if they don't have food? What if they don't have the basic needs that they need? What if they have a child? Do you have childcare available? So all of those questions were definitely coming up as the counselors and career coaches and educators were in those tours. And the colleges and universities, I won't say they were put on the spot, but they definitely were asked, and some had some great resources, others maybe not quite as much. So even though we didn't have our counselors chime in here, I just know from doing those tours, it was a concern.
No, that's very helpful, and you will be getting a follow-up email from me because I've got questions about that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Shannon.
I'm also curious if anybody from this group that joined this call, how does this resonate? Like, what's missing from this picture as we think about how to strengthen that connection from high school to college access? Like, what would you share? What would you want us to know on this side doing this work that might be missing from how we're talking about it, how we're thinking about it?
I'm going to chime in again on that one too, because I was
Yeah.
thinking as you were talking, like Aaron, like you, Carrie, I've been in this work for a while, and there are certain students that come from certain demographics, they're not scared to ask for help. They're not ashamed to ask for help, right? They grew up, if you need help, ask for it, right? But there are certain demographics of our students that I think it is better now. I think the word has reach students a little bit more back than when I started in higher ed, 27 years ago, right? I do think that students are feeling more empowered to ask these kinds of questions because they are seeing what the colleges are doing, to help them. If they say we have a food pantry on campus, or if we have, an opportunity for a student to come. I mean, I'll use an example of the ice storm that just happened, in Mississippi. When the University of Mississippi came out and said we have emergency funds, through donors for people who lost work wages while everything was closed, where they lost food that was in their freezer or their refrigerator while power was out for 7 days. To me, that was very powerful because I had two Ole Miss students sitting at my household, and my son's girlfriend had lost, 2 weeks worth of wages, right, at her job in Oxford. And just the opportunity for the University of Mississippi to say, hey, we have these funds available. But I think it goes back to what Aaron said before. Those were funds that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, were given by private donors, maybe outside of the university. So.
A lot of them are, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah. So, I mean,
Mhm.
going back to, having the ability, but I do think from my span of working over higher ed for however many years, I do think it's better. I still think we have a long way to go, right? But empowering these students to say it never hurts to ask. And those are some of the questions that if you're struggling with some of these basic needs already while you're in high school, you need to be finding a higher education opportunity that maybe can help you with these things.
I think that's one of the important things about, the reality is that the vast majority of modern learners and students who were like me weren't going away to college. I wasn't getting academic help, I wasn't getting a scholarship. So, for the students that stay in their communities and go to their, their local regional, their local community college, for the institution to be able to articulate and to communicate that they care, that there are supportive resources to connect them to benefits is actually really important because that could make the difference between somebody enrolling and feeling like, yeah, it's going to be tough, but I'll figure it out. I know my institution has supports available to me, or, making sure that the high school counselors, the college admission support people understand where those resources are and exist to be able to communicate that to people could make a really big difference.
Don't see any other questions in the chat. I'm sure folks will be following up for sure on some of your information. And like we said, we'll have the recording out there. It will be on YouTube immediately following this presentation. I see Erin put her email in the chat. Carrie, I know yours was in there earlier, and you put the Trellis newsletter there. Make sure that we're following these resources. I know we get lots of emails, but if this is something that is really a passion for yours or something you want to share with students, make sure that you're following these great resources. And that's what we like to do in Topic Tuesdays is introduce. I know probably a lot of you on this call probably already know Erin as we've found out through the conversation, but having these resources outside of Mississippi as well are really important so that we can see things from a national scale. And I believe we hosted Carrie in September, and I believe she fell in love with Mississippi and would love to come back and help us wherever we need her. So
Absolutely.
we appreciate y'all's information today. So if there's no questions or comments, or if y'all have anything else, we'll kind of wrap up. Y'all good?
Thank you, Shannon and Kirsten, for hosting us today. I just want to give a shout out to Lord Hines and people say shout out anymore. I don't know. I'm beyond that. I have no idea.
We'll take it.
And Get to College. They do such great work. And if you did know about them, if you have people that don't know about them but could use what they do, please share it because I'm so impressed with all the work that they do for our students in Mississippi.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, and thanks for joining our session today.
We're so glad to have you, and thank you for all the great information. Like I said, I'll be working to get this on YouTube immediately following this webinar. If you registered and attended this, we will send you a follow-up email with all of this information and a link to the recording. And even for those who signed up and weren't able to attend, they will get a link to the recording as well. So today was our 8th webinar of our Fall and Spring Topic Tuesday series. Stay tuned for our next Topic Tuesday webinar, which will be on Tuesday, April the 7th, supporting those who serve us, military members, and their families. You will kind of see a theme in these remaining ones. We talked about student basic needs. Then we'll be supporting our military families, and then mental health matters in our May webinar as well. So we will be kind of discussing, these topics that we briefly mentioned even today, excuse me, in serving all of our families. So we will be continuing this webinar throughout the spring through May. If you've participated in 5 webinars over the course of this academic year, you'll have the opportunity to apply for 0.5 CEUs. And then if you participate in all 10 webinars over the fall and spring, you'll have the opportunity to apply for 1 full CEU. And the remaining webinars, of course, are listed here, and they're also on our website under the Educator section. Then select Topic Tuesday under the Events section. While you're there, please check out all the other resources for you and your students listed under the Educator tab. I mentioned those tours earlier, the Sweet Magnolias tours. They are also under the Educator section under Campus Tour. Those are great opportunities for our educators to get in depth. It will be, I don't have a slide for this. I probably should have put one in, but April the 8th, we will be touring Mississippi College and Jackson State University. And then on April the 13th, we will be touring the University of Mississippi and Northwest Mississippi Community College in Senatobia. So you do have those 2 choices as well under the Educator section, in addition to other training opportunities. We are kind of winding down a little bit of our training as we are getting to the end of our academic year, and we hope that most students have completed their FAFSA in Mississippi. But we do have one more opportunity for some FAFSA training. This is our virtual FAFSA 201 training, so it will be virtual. So you may say to me, Shannon, what is 201? How is that different than FAFSA 101? Well, FAFSA 101 is going to be your basics, right? How to complete the FAFSA, the types of aid that are out there. FAFSA 201 is a new training for us this year or in the last year, and it's really fun. It's scenario based. So you will be asked, to participate, but we will have 8 or 9 different scenarios. Some are hard, some are not quite as hard, but different scenarios that I promise you probably face every day in your school. And we do that scenario based training and back it up with our all famous FAFSA rules so that you know how to work with your students as those come across your desk. So we hope that you will join us for the remainder Topic Tuesdays, FAFSA 201 training, and those educator tours. So I say we don't have a whole lot left between now and May, but we kind of do. So we hope that y'all will join us for any of that. And then, of course, here is our contact information. Our training email is there, training@gettocollege.org, and we will be glad to answer any questions that you might have as you wrap up your school year. So we appreciate you for joining us here in March, and we will see you all again in April for our next Topic Tuesday. So take care and have a great day.